So the Tiangong-1, the Chinese first space station, crashed not too long ago over the southern Pacific after uncontrollably re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Most likely, it all but burned up upon re-entry. It never made it to actually the water level. Now, ironically, this actually happened very close to the place called Spacecraft Cemetery, where companies and agencies purposefully try to aim their defunct satellites or an occasional space station. Mother Nature does have a sense of humor, as this, of course, happened on April Fool's Day. Now, this is one example of orbital debris that comes back to Earth and burns up. But lots of debris stays in orbit and, of course, poses a significant risk to current and future operations. So my name is Nikolai Khlistov. I lead the airspace industry community work at the World Economic Forum. And I'd like to present to you today an idea for a space sustainability rating, which is a new mechanism to try to help address the issue of space debris. I'll first talk briefly about the World Economic Forum, why we look at the fourth industrial revolution, why we think it's important, how it relates to space. We'll look at the challenge of space debris, some of the solutions to the problem, and of course, I'll present the framework, the space sustainability rating. So the World Economic Forum is an international organization for public-private collaboration. We bring together leaders from government, business, and civil society to look at some of the world's biggest challenges. With headquarters in Geneva, New York, San Francisco, Beijing, and Tokyo, we're really a platform for multi-stakeholder discussions. Now, we bring together leaders to understand the big challenges for the world, but also to catalyze action on the challenges which are already understood. It's been founded in 1971 by Professor Klaus Schwab, really very much like a Silicon Valley startup out of his garage, actually. Now, we do put a lot of emphasis currently in our organization on the fourth industrial revolution, because we see it putting enormous pressure on current regulatory and policy frameworks. The number of technologies such as biotech, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, they're changing so rapidly, but also impacting each other in ways which we cannot yet fully understand. And we really see that governments are struggling to cope with some of these policies to address these new technologies because of the scale and scope of the change. There's a need for faster and more agile governance protocols. More multi-stakeholder collaboration is needed. So the forum, we are addressing this, and we've opened a new center for the fourth industrial revolution to help governments think through some of these challenges. Now, of course, space is a big part of this new industrial revolution. Think of miniaturization and how that, miniaturization of technology, and how that has helped our sector. But of course, the space sector influences back a lot of the industries back on Earth through communication technologies, advanced manufacturing, robotics. Now, the forum is a relatively new actor in the space field, but we have been increasing our activities through a number of panels and workshops. We have a Global Future Council on Space Technologies, which has been around for a number of years now, and is composed of a diverse group of global stakeholders, really looking at the sectoral challenges and over-the-horizon issues which are looming. Now, some of the products of the Council have been a report on the benefits of the space sector. We've created an application to support humanitarian disaster response, and most recently, a framework which I'll present to you today, the space sustainability rating, to help address debris problem in orbits. Now, I probably don't have to explain to you here why space debris is a serious risk. It's been increasingly in the media over the last couple of years, and so I think there's a general understanding now of the problem. I believe it's a global commons which is at risk. And collective action is necessary, but will be difficult as more new actors enter the scene, divergent opinions persist, and really there's perhaps a lack of enforcement mechanisms out there to make sure that bad behavior or responsible behavior is punished or controlled. Now, there are more than 500,000 pieces of debris which are smaller than a marble size. Now, most of it is concentrated in orbits between 600 and 1,200 kilometers, which is a subset of lower Earth orbits. Now, the International Space Station orbits just a couple hundred kilometers below that. And frequently, several times a year, in fact, the cosmonauts and astronauts on the ISS have to take evasive action and adjust the location of the space station to avoid potential impacts. Now, in fact, they even have to take shelter in the Soyuz modules to make sure that if there's a catastrophic event, they're able to evacuate safely. Now, there are a lot of other satellites, of course, in orbits which are at risk as well. Communications, Earth observation, GPS. But just like the ISS, future stations that a lot of us are talking about and thinking about today, scientific missions, any other industrial missions, will be at an increasing risk. Now think of yourself as a future space tourist, for example. How much risk are you going to be prepared to take if you're thinking of doing a little weekend getaway in orbit? And that risk will continue to increase. So I think to fully realize the potential that this new space age has to offer, we need to be more conscious about protecting our orbits and make sure they're safe. More responsible activity and action will be necessary. If we expand commercial activities in the coming years, and we really want to profit from all the promises that full Earth connectivity has, Earth observation and all the challenges that it could help solve on Earth, or future tourism, space tourism, we need to start tackling the issue of space debris. And it's better to start doing that sooner rather than later. Now, how do we do that? So first of all, of course, we have to start removing some of the debris, and probably start with the larger pieces, which have the potential to cause more harm. And there are a number of agencies and organizations, universities, and companies working to solve these technical challenges. And the technical challenges are pretty significant. But at the same time, we also need to be much more conscious about how we operate in orbit. And actors need to follow the internationally accepted guidelines, for example, those by UNUSA or IADC. But perhaps these are not enforceable enough, or perhaps they don't even go far enough as we think about the future years. So what other mechanism can we think of to incentivize actors to be more responsible and sustainable when it comes to orbit operations? So I'm delighted to introduce to you today the Space Sustainability Rating, which is a framework meant to support existing guidelines and policies. Now, it's been developed by the Global Future Council on Space Technologies, and we have a couple members, in fact, of the council with us in the audience. And I'm glad to say that Simonetta De Pipo, who was just before me on stage, was one of the key actors in helping develop the framework. Now, it's a market mechanism, which is meant to create peer pressure on actors by providing a single and simple rating that measures their operations and approach to debris mitigation, thereby increasing transparency. Voluntary and verified by trusted third party, it would showcase the extent to which launch and operators, companies, adopt approaches and follow internationally accepted principles. It's meant to incentivize, so reward positive behavior rather than punish potentially bad behavior. And it's really meant to increase competition among actors. So customers can opt for one that has a higher rating. So think of silver, gold, or platinum, rather than one that does not. Or think of insurance providers who can offer a better premium to those who have a more positive or higher rating. Of course, for this to happen, this needs to be an industry-wide and accepted framework. And we think it can be. Now, as it relates to the approach, so it would build on existing data and assessments, and then through a means of a questionnaire, we would fill in the gaps, right? And this questionnaire would be conducted by an actor on voluntary basis, and then by a third party published publicly. So think of examples such as LEED certification or ISO. And we really think that it can bring much more focus on sustainability when it comes to orbital operations, and allow actors to compete on something else rather than just price or performance. Of course, there are a number of technical questions which we'll need to work through in actually building the rating itself. So for example, how do we address different types of constellations, traditional large satellites in small numbers versus some of the new constellations which are much smaller in size but have, obviously, as you know, many more satellites in them. Or how do we differ between different types of orbits and different characteristics that LEO and GEO has, for example. But we have a number of key stakeholders on board already, And I'm also glad to share with you that we've opened up a request for proposals to find an organization that would work with us and our existing partners in building the rating and then taking over the management and ownership of the rating in the long term. And the deadline for that, as you see, is October 29th, so until the end of October. And you see the link here for more information. Now, before I leave you and perhaps we'll open up some questions, I would like to finish with a quote, which probably many of you have heard of, but perhaps don't know the author. And it really comes with a great Russian scientist, mathematician, and really the grandfather of all rocketry and space travel, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, who said, "Earth is a cradle of humanity, but one cannot stay in a cradle forever." So I think if humanity is really to take advantage of all the space sector has to offer and really go beyond permanently, not just into orbit, but beyond, we need to make sure that the first step we take does not put us in a lot of broken glass. Thank you very much, and perhaps we'll open up for some questions. If we have questions. Or microphone, perhaps.
Thank you very much. I was wondering how in this space stability rating framework you intend to collaborate with system quality, system reliability experts versus consulting groups specialized in environmental impacts. Those are very different communities that don't talk to each other a lot. How do you see this? How do you think they can work together on that project?
Absolutely. It's a good question. So I think the key will be in when we actually build the rating over the coming months and probably year or so. And there really, we want to engage all the different stakeholders, right, to make sure that the rating is meaningful and really covers all the different aspects of orbital sustainability. Afterwards, when it's up and running, we would rely on this third-party organization, which I've discussed, to be a trusted source, right? And so the actors would have that trusted relationship with that association or an organization to share that competitive information about their operations, right? And that would produce the rating. But I think the key will be in designing the rating and in really there engaging in all the different stakeholders that you've referred to. I think one in the back row.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question. You are considering orbital sustainability. Are you also considering the environment on the Earth, the impact on the Earth's environment, and to the point of even when we do studies, we consume water, paper, and things like that, really the global impact of each mission?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think where we are right now is we want to get this going, right? And we've discussed all different levels of sustainability and what it can impact, right? Even not just launch and what it means for orbital, perhaps debris, but launch actually on the ground, right? So emissions and things like that. I think we want to start off with actually focusing on orbital debris first, which is, for us, we feel that's the more urgent problem, right? And then perhaps once the rating is functioning and operational, it can expand to cover other topics, right? So you can imagine that it doesn't only cover perhaps impact on Earth, but also as the space sector grows and we have more activity beyond orbit, it can expand to that. I know, for example, the LEED certification for buildings has added on other different types of things to cater to new developments, right? Or ISO obviously has released new types of certification as well. So certainly something to think about for the future.
As a voluntary rating system, how do you intend to incentivize corporations to participate, especially if I'm going to be putting a large constellation up where I would expect to get a low rating? How are we going to incentivize larger participation in the rating system?
Excellent question, of course. So the idea has been really for the voluntary component, right? To appeal to this market mechanism, right? And so the companies that do have sustainable operations and do think they're good actors we think would want to jump on board, and we've seen that already in terms of the interest shown. And we don't need to have to kick off with 100% penetration of the industry sector here. I think we need to create a sort of a critical mass of actors, and then the market will speak for itself, right? This is not again, as a voluntary mechanism, even if we have a certain percentage of actors on board, as a customer, you may actually would decide, and you'll give you another point of reference, right? And as sustainability gains more and more traction, certainly in the space sector as well, we feel this will be an important component for decision makers, whether it's commercial customers, governments, et cetera. And so, again, coming back to my example of insurance, you know, with a meaningful rating, insurance providers, for example, can also offer better premium rates, right? Or even government agencies can actually take this into account when giving somebody a license. So there are a number of mechanisms that could work there. I think back in the front here.
Yeah, just like to elaborate about this point about how to incentivize industries to comply with the requirements, with the best standards. Maybe setting standards for environmental impact is the first step towards setting taxes, imposing taxes that could be helpful to compensate the impact of the actors, maybe by performing active debris removal or investing in space traffic management facilities. So I think, do you think this could also be part of the project on the long run? Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a component of it. I'm not sure, and this is something to explore. I'm not sure we've thought about making something like taxes part of this. This is, I think, really meant to be a sort of an informal approach, right? A market approach to incentivize, right? Without any formal enforcement mechanisms in itself. I think that's a separate approach that different organizations can take. I mean, I know, for example, that certainly the cost of active debris removal is a big question there, and who finances that? So certainly questions to be had around that.
Yes, my question is, I think the sustainability rating makes sense, but I think that there's still some science that needs to be done to really be able to quantify, what sustainable means and how to actually achieve it. So, in the development of this rating, how do you enlist science and technology and research organizations to be able to provide substance upon which you would actually measure the criteria against this sustainability rating?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's going to be the critical component, really, and that's why I'm here speaking about this today, because we want to really build a working group that's meaningful. And as the World Economic Forum, we always engage different stakeholders, right? That's really the secret sauce for our organization. So it is going to be important not just to have the industry, governmental organizations, but also the various experts from across the field to make sure that there's meaningful science behind it, that the ratings are properly weighted. So that's going to be a critical component for it to be meaningful, absolutely. And that's really the work ahead in developing it.
My questions regarding your questionnaire that you're sending to these companies. Is there any information, pardon me, thank you. Much better. Is there any information on it that companies that launch both military and commercial satellites would be hesitant to make public?
It's a good question. So how we've approached this is that it will be, because companies, as you said, might not want to share some sensitive and competitive information, right? To promote their sustainable practices, right? Actually, a rating would sort of shield them from that, right? So as long as we have an organization that's trusted, right? I mean, an actor would share to get an insurance premium, would share some of their potentially sensitive data with an insurance provider, right? So in the very same way, they would share some of the information, if they want to participate, of course, with the organization that runs the rating, right? And then only that final rating of gold would be published, right? So the public information would not be disclosing their specifics about the manufacturing of the satellite or their specific orbital mechanisms, operations. So we feel that will help companies be comfortable that they're not sharing competitive data, but rather if they want to participate, they would just have a simple, kind of visible public rating that would be shared, right? So in very much in the same way that you would share information with an insurance provider to get insured, right? And again, not everybody gets insured, and so this will be a choice. I think that's it for the questions. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and